Look, there's just no good reason why Australia's refused this deal, which was on the offer, on the table for 9 years. So really, I think for many people today, it's more of a feeling of great relief than any real sense of celebration at this announcement. It's clear that for years, the government just wanted to punish these people who came here seeking safety and protection, as is their right. And what is illegal under international law is what Australia did, which was to use immigration detention, prolonged immigration detention, as punishment rather than as a last resort. So we know that the coalition was also hesitant to follow through on the New Zealand deal because they said, if these asylum seekers and refugees settle in New Zealand, then they could travel back to Australia and settle here. But, that was just all politics and posturing because the coalition had insisted that these people would never be allowed to come here. There was, it was just fear-mongering and politics. It wasn't based on any real security concern. So I'm pleased the government has backed down on that particular part of the deal. These people who go to New Zealand, they won't be prevented from coming to Australia, as any New Zealander is not currently prevented. But I also think people are feeling quite cynical at the moment about this announcement. We know that there's an election coming up. The government is facing a real fight in some seats where independents are challenging their sitting members. And we know that people are alarmed at how cruel and inhumane Australia's policy is.
Has this announcement come as a surprise to you? What do you make of the timing?
Look, I think we knew it was in the works. But, for 9 years, you just have to ask what for. To accept it now, all of that suffering, to be so cruel. People's lives were absolutely ruined. In those offshore camps, we saw 9 people commit suicide. Doctors say that they'd never seen children so traumatised. So I think that's the main question tonight is what was it all for?
So you believe it is a step in the right direction, but does it go far enough? How many asylum seekers will miss out on this resettlement program?
So at the moment, there's just over 200 people, about 215, 16 who remain offshore in Nauru and PNG. And then there's over 1,000 in the community here in Australia and 51 still in detention. So the deal with New Zealand is 150 a year for 3 years. So 450 people, that will make a dent in that overall number, but it still leaves about 900 people without any safety, without a clear resettlement plan. So that's incredibly cruel as well. There needs to be a plan for them, otherwise they just stay in limbo, which they have been for years now. So it is a concern that this arrangement will not be sufficient to cover the needs of everybody.
And asylum seekers in Papua New Guinea won't be part of this resettlement program. What is the situation like for those there right now?
These people have just not really been able to live their lives now for 9 years. Many of them are young. They've lost the best years of their lives, locked up in these offshore camps. And we were concerned to hear that the refugees in Papua New Guinea were not part of this deal, but we were pleased to hear from the UN Refugee Agency that they have come up with a deal with New Zealand. So the UNHCR put out a statement today saying that refugees and asylum seekers currently in Papua New Guinea, whilst they're not included as part of this deal with Australia and New Zealand, the UNHCR and New Zealand are going to work out a separate deal for those people. So that's pleasing, and we hope that happens as soon as possible.
And New Zealand has been failing to meet its annual refugee quotas. Will it likely step up its program even more and take in more asylum seekers annually?
Look, you'd hope so. Look at the world right now. Look what's happening in Ukraine. Look at Afghanistan. I think we can all see how many people need safety and protection at the moment. And yes, it's been hard during COVID to resettle refugees, and Australia has also had some of our programs paused. So we are really hoping that this year is the year that all countries are generous, because only a tiny number of refugees are resettled every year. And these people are just like us, they just want their children to be safe.
How much more work does Australia have to do to progress its resettlement programs?
Look, we have long called on Australia to take many more refugees. It was good to see the government's announcements on Ukraine this week or last week recently, but we still haven't been generous in terms of people coming from Afghanistan. Australia has a real responsibility there. Our troops serve there. We really should be taking many, many more thousands of people than we are taking at the moment. So we really hope that this is something that the government, once we hopefully are through the worst of COVID this year, that this can be something that the government looks to increase, because we're such a wealthy country. We should be taking more.
Meanwhile, Sophie, in the UK, there's been much debate over a bill that will affect Ukrainian refugees significantly. What are the challenges here?
Look, I mean, I think what's particularly alarming about Australia's inhumane policies is that they have enjoyed real impunity. They haven't really, there's been no deterrence for them not to act in this way. And what's so alarming is it's encouraged other governments to follow suit. And last year we saw Denmark authorise the transfer of asylum seekers to offshore locations like Australia has done. And yeah, this bill right before the House of Commons that was being debated last night in the House of Commons is going to allow refugees to be criminalised, pushed back at sea and detained offshore. So the worst aspects of Australia's policies now being copied by other countries. So Human Rights Watch is calling on the UK government not to adopt these aspects of the bill. So it passed, but we understand it's going to go before the Lords for negotiation. And we are just, we couldn't say stronger that these policies should not be replicated anywhere. They're so harmful. They cause immeasurable suffering. They're cruel, they're inhumane, and they destroy people's lives.
Sophie McNeil, thank you.
Thanks for having me.